Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on our first attempt at doing these online meetings with the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, for the Spiritist Society of Baltimore. But first, before we get into our usual routine of beginning with a prayer and beginning our discussion/talk, we wanted to just briefly touch on some of the reasons why we are deciding to use this medium, this platform, as we all are aware of what's going on in the world right now. We know we live in a planet of transitions, challenges. So we know that there is this virus going around, this coronavirus that's going around right now. So we want to make sure in abundance of caution that we are protecting our community, but also utilizing what resources we have to continue to spread this beautiful message of Spiritism, to reach out to those who are in need, to comfort hearts and souls, because ultimately, no matter what, that is our goal, and that is what we hope to continue to do, regardless of what barriers are placed in our way. Thank God, with modern society, we have all these amazing technological advances where we can, in the comfort of our own home, log on and listen to and partake in the beauty of these types of meetings. So we would like to say that we are adhering to the Center for Disease Control's recommendations, the World Health Organization's recommendations. Of course, we've already been in contact with those in our community, urging people to follow those recommendations. But also, from a Spiritist perspective, we wanted to remind ourselves, our community, and one another the importance of maintaining faith, maintaining calm, maintaining just allowing yourself to exude love and kindness towards others, and not to allow yourself to get caught up in the fear and pandemonium of all that which is going on right now, because sometimes the psychosphere can shift because of all the negative emotions that are going on, vibrations, because of the fear that's in the atmosphere. So it's important for us to continue to tap into our higher spirituality, our higher selves, our guardian angels, our spirit guides, and we continue to have our connection with God, our prayers at home, our studies, and continue to allow ourselves to be connected with God, because we know that nothing happens by chance, that God and the good spirits and their divine wisdom allow things to happen for a reason. So if we can just take this opportunity, like any other opportunity in the world where we experience something that's challenging or difficult, and take the time to self-reflect and use it as an opportunity for personal growth, but also as a reminder of our own immortality, and a reminder of why we're really here on this planet Earth. So without further ado, I would ask that you join me in prayer at this moment as we open up our study this evening, our talk, rather. So for those of you who are watching over the web, I do encourage you to go ahead and close your eyes, but if you are driving, obviously do not do that. But if you would like, you can take this moment to close your eyes, take a deep breath in and out. Let us give thanks for this moment to our great Creator, our Father, Mother God. We thank our mentors, our guides, for inspiring us and encouraging us to continue on the spread of these teachings. We ask, dear Heavenly Father, our spirit guides, that our message, that the message of Spiritism through these teachings may console many hearts that are listening now on the web, the recorded version, are those who are currently in the spirit realm, witnessing tonight's presentation. We ask for your inspiration to be the vessel of light and love, and the messages from our dear Sister Joanna de Angelis. May you bless all those that are watching in both realms of life and bring them peace, serenity, and balance. We thank you in Jesus' name, and so be it. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us with this opening prayer. Bear with us for any technical difficulties that may arise, for this is our first time transmitting through this medium in this way. So bear with us. So for those of you who have been following us along for some weeks now, you know that we have been studying this particular book called Jesus in Our Days. It's psychographed by the medium Divaldo Franco, by the spirit Joanna de Angelis. We are on chapter 13, which is entitled Jesus and Revolution. Now, this particular book, which we always highly recommend people go out and purchase, whether at your local Spiritist center or online at different Spiritist bookstores. It's an excellent book, not only to study, have on your bedside table, but it will definitely enrich your life. If you haven't already done so, we highly recommend you watch the previous recorded versions from the other chapters, just to get an idea and a grasp and understanding of the previous chapters as well. But independent, if you've never watched any of our videos before, that's entirely okay. You can go ahead and just jump in and watch this video, and each individual message is beautiful in and of itself. So when we talk about Jesus and revolution, excuse me, true to every presentation we have given, we always try to define when Joanna is talking about a particular topic for each chapter, either Jesus and revolution, Jesus and challenges, Jesus and reincarnation, Jesus and humanity, Jesus and love, and so forth and so on, are the different titles of her chapters. So we like to define the actual topic that she's bringing to us. So the word revolution itself has many different meanings, but for the intents and purposes of our presentation today, the definitions that we are going to be utilizing from Merriam-Webster Dictionary is the definition: a sudden, radical, or complete change, a fundamental change in the way of thinking about or visualizing something, or a change of paradigm. So this particular definition is what Joanna is the point of view that Joanna is coming from when we're studying this particular chapter. She is talking about how our relationship with Jesus can revolutionize, can create this paradigm shift within us, and should within us, and we can go through this radical change. We can look at examples such as the story behind Saul, who became Paul, and his radical change, and many different other followers of Jesus who went through a very radical change. We can read a lot about those different stories through Paul and Stephen, or any of the books of Andrea Louise, or the book series with Chico Xavier and Emmanuel. You can see a lot of these examples given throughout history of people who decided to change their lives. So let's go ahead and jump in to some things. Now there's a really good book that came out many, many years ago. It's entitled Jesus, the Greatest Therapist Who Ever Lived, by Dr. Mark W. Baker. Now we're bringing a particular snippet from this particular book to sort of bring to us this idea of how our thoughts can be revolutionized and how our perspectives can be changed. You know, in life, we go through peaks and valleys. What is that? You know, we go through highs and we go through lows. And we read something in this particular book that really is going to help us to establish a sort of backbone of today's presentation. And we'll get more into that as we begin this dialogue together. But let me share the story that Dr. Baker shares in this book. At one point, Dr. Baker shares in the book in the very beginning how in his own personal life he had struggled with the common question that a lot of people ask themselves, that why am I going through this? Why is God allowing? What is the purpose in all this? And he said one particular day he went to go and visit his brother, Tim. Excuse me. And on this particular day, his brother, Tim, had said something very significant to him that ultimately changed his life and his perspective. So we wanted to share this story. So Dr. Baker goes to his brother's house, and he's talking about and he's complaining about his life and all his struggles and his hardships that he's going through. And his brother Tim, per Mr. Baker, Dr. Baker, he's a very calm person. He's a geologist, I believe, which we'll see here in a second. And he just has an overall calm demeanor. So he's listening to his brother, Mark, and responds with the following. You know, Mark, when I was out doing a geological survey recently, I noticed an interesting thing about the way the world is made. Our team climbed up the tallest mountain in the area, and we were exhilarated by the view. Mountaintop experiences are great. However, when you are up that high above the timberline, and the timberline is right above the trees, you can see that trees only grow up to a certain altitude, and above that, they can't survive. On the very top of the mountain, there is no growth. But if you look down, you notice an interesting thing. All the growth is in the valleys. That's a significant perspective on life, a significant way we can take this imagery, take this experience of this geologist and apply it to our everyday lives, that we often think and hope for and look forward to the peaks in our lives. We look forward to when we have all the highs in our lives and all the good things are happening. But in reality, the real growth tends to happen in our valleys, in our low points. So it's something for us to think about when we're going through hardships, that it's actually to help to grow us, to allow us to be transformed, to revolutionize us into something much better, much deeper, more stronger, full of faith, and just to grow us into our best selves, really. And just as a little of finalizing this excerpt from the book, Dr. Baker ends with saying that the meaning he took away from Tim's parable was that suffering feels bad, but it can also lead to growth. So something for us to remember and think about when we are reflecting on our own lives, especially now, the life that we are living, the world that we are living in. You know, life is all about the peaks and valleys, and then oftentimes our most difficult times are during those valleys, during those low points, but that's also where we grow. And nature is a great reflection of God's wisdom and life and how things work. So we can look to nature as lessons. The micro and the macrocosms of the world, we can see it's a direct reflection of the world as we know it today. So something for us to keep in mind, sort of a take-home message as well, for us to think about whenever we're going through our hardships. Remember this story about our peaks and valleys. So diving right into the first parts of this book, Joanna brings to us the following. As usual, she talks about Jesus and reflects about the particular topic she's talking about. So let's dive right in. She says, Jesus always acted as a profound psychologist. People's outward appearance, the way they spoke about their illnesses, or their sentiments were not important to him. When people talk about what is going on inside them, they invariably use words to hide what they would otherwise like to say. People have an unconscious dread of laying themselves bare to themselves, let alone to someone else. Let's stop right there for a second and discuss this a little bit. We know that Jesus was perfect, and we often refer to him as this great psychologist, this greatest therapist, healer, lover of humanity. So, of course, in everything that he did, there was a wisdom behind it. And he understood that it wasn't necessary to listen to what someone says, because as Joanna is bringing to us, that oftentimes people can't really even face themselves, as she's talking about in the second paragraph when she refers to laying yourself bare. Basically is a terminology we use to talk about being completely open to yourself about who we are. And oftentimes that mere aspect of our lives can be very challenging and very difficult. So with that in mind, there are many different perspectives that Jesus had to deal with and he already knew about. She goes on to say that on the other hand, although very few people could be open and honest with who they truly were, on the other end of the spectrum, very few people know how to listen, see, and understand. So on one hand, we have those who are suffering, going through hardships. It's difficult for them to self-reflect and be open. But on the other hand, we also have those who would like to help, but aren't that great at listening, because it is an art form to learn how to truly listen. She goes on to say a friendly smile at one moment may become a sneer the next, and kindness may turn into violence. Furthermore, listeners receive speakers' projections, adapting the information to their own predicament and their grasp of it to their own areas of conflict. So like that saying, we see in others the reflection of ourselves. So it's difficult sometimes for us to really understand others because we're always using our own personal experiences as references. And so we kind of listen to, or we have selective hearing, and we hear what we think we want to hear or need to hear, and we, based upon our own personal experiences in our own lives, we're not truly hearing what others have to say, but rather our own understanding and our own circumstances in life. She goes on to reflect again about Jesus, and she says, as the perfect man, Jesus, clear in his effective transparency, penetrated people's deepest unconscious mysteries, which they struggled on the surface of effects without going back to the causes. His dialogues were short and to the point. He used neither circumlocutions nor evasions. When he spoke in parables or used a question to answer a question asked by hypocrites and Pharisees, he was employing an unparalleled technique by which such impostors revealed themselves in their own words. So we can see the dynamic that Jesus used was very profound and perfect in a sense for what was needed at that time. He knew exactly how to deal and look at people in such a way where it wasn't necessary for him to use an abundance of words or questioning. He could just look at you, look deep down into your soul, and know what the issues were. And he didn't stop to listen to what people had to say. Again, because what Joanna reflects on the beginning parts of this chapter, that we often don't share everything because for fear of being entirely open or fear of just being entirely open to ourselves. So Jesus knew how to look into our hearts and our deep unconscious to know what lied beneath. Joanna goes on to say he did this repeatedly. He used it with the priest who asked him about who his neighbor was, which resulted in the parable of the Good Samaritan, leading the priest through logic to the conclusion Likewise, he applied the method with those who asked him if it was lawful to pay taxes, requesting a coin and asking them whose likeness was engraved on it. So again, he used these techniques because he knew the hearts of people and of men and women before him. And he used these techniques to touch their hearts and to awaken them to the reality of what was inside of them and their great abilities, which Joanna will refer to as we go on as well. She goes on to say, it was with sufferers, however, that he employed the best psychotherapy anyone has ever known. And we see this in many interactions that we read about, whether it's in the Bible or in our Spiritist literature, in Jesus' interactions with people, with the disciples, and the apostles' experiences as well, and how Christ was able to just look at them and look into their heart and pull out what was necessary. And it always seemed as though Jesus knew so much and could see what lied beneath the surface. So in every aspect of his life, every opportunity, every moment that he had to speak, everything had a purpose, everything had a reason, a rhyme, and everything was meant to help others, whether to grow, to help them to find comfort, to bring healing or self-awareness. He did not probe his patients' dreams to discover their unconscious, their archives, and their psychological shadows. He did not prescribe the usual medications or other complex formulas. He did not make them somatize their stressful issues through accusations of any sort. Instead, he loved them, offering them safety and helping them discover their latent, abandoned abilities. This is something very beautiful because Jesus, even though he was able to look into our heart, to look into our soul, and to see what was really there, even sometimes for us, that might even be scary, acknowledging what is really there. The beauty in all that was that it's not that he did that to judge us, to focus on something negative, but he looked deep down into our soul and he wanted to bring out something positive, this latent ability within us to love, to heal, to forgive ourselves and others. All of the interactions and the stories we've ever heard about Jesus was always about helping that person find love within themselves, bringing them back to balance and harmony with themselves. Something very interesting we should think about, because our modern day therapists, of course, have to go through many different layers of our personality, of our psyche, in order to fully understand what is going on within us. But Jesus, the therapist par excellence, just could look at you and you were affected by his magnetism, independent of who you were. And he could just reach into your soul and pull out all those latent qualities that were good and help you to bring them out. Excuse me. He awakened in them a new vision of life, supporting them at that moment, but not keeping them from continuing as they so desired. So he never tried to push anyone in one particular direction. He tried to support us, as he still does today. He supports us in being the best version of ourselves, and still allows us to have this free will to choose. He never imposed himself on anyone. He never forced himself. He was very gentle and calm in the ways in which he handled people around him. All sought him, whereas he sought no one. Because the success of any undertaking depends on the interested party. The circumstantial factors are the arena, the space or they will act. So it was important to note that people sought him out. And it was important that people made that step to seek help. Because it's one thing if we're suffering and going through hardships and just ruminating in our hardships. But what's most important is that we recognize the need for us to go out and get help in whatever fashion, in a positive way, of course, which is most important. The fact that they would come and search for Jesus was also an important part of their healing, as it is today. It is an important part of our own personal healing that we go in search of him. Now, though you might say, well, Jesus is not in Bethlehem anymore. He's somewhere out in this great vast universe, somewhere maybe living on the sun or whatnot. But we still can connect to him. We still have this capability. That is the beauty and the amazing thing about this, as Joanna is sharing with us, what happened at that time when Jesus was on the physical plane. But it still can happen today. It's a big component of our faith, our belief, for us to connect to this and tap into these abilities that we have within us to connect with this higher power, to find balance, to find healing. Joanna goes on to say, it is true that nearly all those who benefited by receiving his liberating light pressed on alone by personal choice. Many, if not most, were ungrateful. Others fell back into the same web of indolence that made them weak in the first place. Many others unconsciously and inadvertently accused him. None, however, without exception, were immune to his magnetism, his affability, and his power. So regardless of how people acted after they encountered Jesus, regardless if they were able to maintain that level of healing or not, based upon their own actions, but each person that encountered Jesus was affected by him, his magnetism, his power, and this love that he exuded from every cell in his body. It was inevitable that we would be changed by the experience of meeting him, however short or long, but no one could avoid that, being the pure spirit that he was. And we can see in the many different stories about the healings that Jesus performed, that people would go and get healed by him, and he would urge them, go and sin no more, meaning don't go back and fall back into your old habits. Focus on being the best version of yourself. What would people do? Well, we tend to be creatures of habit. We tend to go back to what we're used to, even if it's bad for us, because it's a habit. So people would get healed and they would leave and sometimes go back into their same debauchery or poor behavior, and oftentimes even get sick again. So it's important when we are reflecting about our relationship with Jesus, even nowadays, right now in our lives, that we're not looking for some mystical, magical experience that's going to change us and do the work for us, when ultimately only I, can do that internal work with the help of Jesus, connecting with him through daily prayer, meditation, whatever other spiritual practice you have, attending a spiritual center, or whatever other spiritual practice you have in connecting with this higher power, with our governor of this planet. It is the personal work that no one can do for us. It is non-transferable. No one can do that work for us. But that's the beauty of it as well. Because I get to do that work, and I get to reap the benefits of this amazing capability that Jesus reminds us that we have inside of us to change, to heal, to be better. Oftentimes we have this internal dialogue that, oh, I'm stuck this way, or I've been this way my whole life. Can't teach an old dog new tricks. Oh, it's just too hard to change. I'm stuck like this. Those are all negative internal dialogues we have with ourselves. And sometimes often, excuse me, they're perpetuated by negative influences in our lives, whether spiritual or otherwise. So it's important for us to pay attention to the things that we say to ourselves, that internal dialogue we're having when we're by ourselves or throughout the day, to be cognizant and aware of our inner world and our own inner workings. Joanna goes on to say, a revolutionary par excellence, Jesus, he turned the struggle inside out. The death of the old man and the birth of the new man. He offered the first step. It was up to the candidate to take the rest. The endeavor was general. The action of each one was each person's responsibility. So Jesus often, if not always, was sort of a catalyst for people in their lives, for us today, until these modern days. He's there to sort of spark and ignite these abilities we have latent within us. For us to take that and run with it, as they say, to utilize that as our stepping stone to inner enlightenment. It's not meant for Jesus to come and do the work for us, but for us to hike up our boots, put on our working gloves, grab our tools, and get to work. There's this beautiful story that is out there, and it's a story I think we've shared before here during one of our talks of this particular two men. And there's a wise man with his disciples, and they're passing by this first man, and his cart has broken down, and the wheels on his cart are broken, and he's kneeling on his feet, praying to the heavens, asking for assistance. So the wise man and his disciples look at this man and continue on walking. Now, mind you, again, this man had been praying and trying to talk to God and ask for help. But the wise man, quietly with his disciples, carries on. And miles down the road, they encounter a second man. Now, this particular man, same situation. His carriage had broken down. Things had just broken apart. His horse had taken off. And he was really just complaining and yelling and just being, showing how frustrated he was. But even though through all his frustration, he was still there with some tools and trying to put the wheel back together, trying to find a way to piece back together this broken cart. As the wise man and his disciples were observing the situation, the wise man goes and helps this man. And then, after they help him, they go on his way. The wise man and the disciples. A little later on down the road, the disciples asked the wise man, Master, why did you help the man that was yelling obscenities and acting so frustrated and just sort of, angry? versus the other man who was being pious, was quietly praying before his carriage that had broken down. And the wise man stopped and was quiet for a moment and looked at his disciples and said, well, yes, the first man was praying, but he didn't take it upon himself to do anything about his situation. He just expected some miraculous thing to happen with his cart. Whereas the second man, although he was yelling and screaming and probably yelling some sort of obscenity, he was actually still working to fix it, trying to find ways to make it better. He wasn't just sitting there expecting something magical to happen or just sitting there complaining, thinking that that's going to do something. So in this lesson, we can learn that absolutely we don't want to take away from the fact how important it is to have a prayerful life and a life where we utilize prayer, and it's so important. But what is also a vital component of our lives is our actions. What we are doing, how we are utilizing our own abilities, our time, the tools that we have at our fingertips to adjust, to make do, as they say, with our circumstances. Therein lies the beauty of life. That is the key, is not to focus on our broken down carriage, but rather, how can I fix it? What can I do to make this better? What can I learn from this moving forward? And how can I utilize my own abilities? Because we all have those, as Joanna calls it, the latent abilities within us to transform, to be better, to tackle whatever challenges are going on in our own lives. There's that famous saying that says that God never gives us anything that our shoulders can't carry. God never gives us anything that we aren't strong enough to deal with. There's a wisdom in that. And it's a reminder that we are stronger than what we think. Because remember, at the beginning of this chapter, Joanna says that Jesus didn't pay attention to our words that we said, how we talked about our illnesses. He could see right through us. I'm sure he could probably even hear or see our internal dialogues. He knew that it was difficult for us to face our own truths. Because through fear of just being completely open to ourselves and who we are. But also in that fear, we lose the opportunity to not only look at ourselves for who we really are, but also look at our latent abilities. So yes, on one hand, it might be really scary to fully be honest with who we are, but we don't have to allow that to be who we will be. So we might say, well, this is where I'm at in life, but I have so many latent abilities to bring me to a different space in my life, to allow me to grow. I don't have to be stuck in the suffering that I'm in. You know, modern day medicine and healthcare workers and people in the field, you know, we often categorize or put people into boxes because that is what we're taught, at least from an allopathic standpoint. But in reality, we are not this box. We are not just this box. We are so much more. And it is in our thinking, our perspectives, that we need to remind ourselves, just like the beginning story of Dr. Baker and his brother Tim. that these peaks and valleys in life are for our growth, for our betterment. And we can stand at the top of the mountain, and we can say, look how beautiful it is, but it's a good way for us to remember that, we can reach the top of the mountain. But it takes work to get up there. And there are growth blocks, building blocks that we have to work on to reach that top. And that when we reach that proverbial top, it's not about having a big ego. It's about being humble and looking at our journey and growing from our journey and be able to help others that are also trying to go up, if you will. Pressing on, Joanna says, he prepared the road. The enemies were on the battlefield of each combatant. He, Jesus, also knew that the effort was arduous and that only perseverance, time, and toil would lead to victory. Thus, he never became irritable or impatient. These reminders to persevere, to toil, to work hard, to allow time for things to progress within us, and to be patient. This recipe is still applicable until today. The fact that we are the ones that have to make that great effort to change our lives is true until today. In fact, in the Spirit's book, they talk about that from one life to the next, the amount of progression that we make, the amount of evolution, growth we have, is actually quite small. And that with very little effort, we can change. Which is a stark reminder that we just need to put a little bit of effort in. And the more and more we work towards something, we put in that effort, that time, we will see the effects of our labor and our toil, much like that story of the wise man and the two gentlemen he passed by on the journey. We can learn from those lessons. We don't believe that it's about we should be yelling and screaming and cursing our way through life. That's not the point. The point is that we should work at it, not be afraid of the work, to get our hands dirty, to put on our work boots, to step in the mud, to get it done. It's not going to be easy, but it is going to be worth it. It's a great reminder. She goes on to say, if you really do want to be cured of your ills, allow yourself to be scrutinized by the sublime psychotherapist. This is a very profound statement, one in which we should read again and again, reflect on, and consider what it means and what it looks like for each of us. If we are like that second man that the wise man encountered, if we really want to get better, we can. But we need to allow ourselves to be opened and connect with this sublime psychotherapist who is Jesus. And what does that look like for us? How do we do that? Well, it can look different for each person. whether that's you beginning a practice of daily prayer and meditation, where you're asking for Jesus' help, to allow yourself to be open to him, to allow your mind and your heart to be permeable, and to really get to know who we are, and to tap into our latent abilities, and to not be afraid to show to Christ who we are. He already sees it anyway. But the action of us opening up is important. Follow his instructions. Jesus left many instructions in the various parables that he left for us about how to live our lives, how to love others and ourselves. Very simple things that often, at one time or another, we might find difficult or challenging. But Joanna does not use an abundance of words here herself. She's straight to the point as well. She says, follow his instructions. Revolutionize yourself by breaking from self-indulgence, self-punishment, self-pity, and the dark past. Revolutionize yourself by breaking from self-indulgence, self-punishment, self-pity, and the dark past. We are our own worst enemy. We are the ones that oftentimes are in our own way. We need to step aside and get out of our own way. Our society suffers a great deal with anxiety, depression, and many psychological challenges and emotional challenges. And it's not that we are a much more complicated society. It's just that we are much better at identifying these things. And they say oftentimes that when we have anxiety, it's when you're worrying too much about the future, and depression when you're stuck too much in the past. And it has its truth to it. So it's important for us to not look back and be stuck there. Just like that man on the road who, yes, was upset that his cart had broken down, but he was doing everything in his power to fix it. He didn't lament or stay focused on that broken cart and just complaining. He worked hard to get it fixed. That is the point. That we're making an effort. That we are doing something. And not expecting some magical, mystical thing to happen to us. It's important for us to not stay focused on what we may have done in the past, what we may have experienced, any trauma or hardships, whether we played a part in it or not. The important thing is that we focus on the here and now and what we can do right now to better ourselves. Because that ultimately is what Jesus was teaching us. To let go of the past, have faith in the future, and focus on the here and now, and utilize your abilities right now to better yourself. Because all those people that came to Jesus, all those who were suffering, the people from varying degrees of debauchery and being involved in things that were negative or sinners, if you will, it didn't matter to him. He loved everybody, and he saw the good in every single person, because there is good in every single person. The latent ability is there. The seed is there within us. It's a great reminder for us to have whenever we get down on ourselves and think that we're not capable of moving on, or I'm always going to be like this, or so-and-so, or my doctor said that I'm going to be like this forever. That's when we need to open up our hearts and our mind to Jesus and connect with this higher power and be reborn on the inside. This rebirth is really significant in our lives. To feel ourselves change, to make that shift is really important. And if we haven't experienced it yet, then maybe we ought to take a second look at our own lives and what we're doing and how we're leading our lives, our internal dialogues, our practices day in and day out. Because if the results aren't there, then there's something that we're doing or not doing to not bring those results there. Because factually, if we are not getting what we want, or we're not at where we want to be, then there are some modifications that we need to make in our own lives. Something for us to think about. Joanna goes on to say, if you want true victory, get on the battlefield and fight. Open yourself up to love, and love without expecting a response. It is so common for humanity, for all of us to some extent, to do something for others and expect them either to do good back to us or to get a certain response back from them. We want to thank you, or we want others to be grateful for us. That's not the point. The point is for us to live our lives accordingly. By love, by faith. We are responsible for our actions. We are not responsible for the actions of others. Ownership is an important factor in our lives. It is important for us to take ownership of our lives, our deeds, our actions, our circumstances, and not to stay stuck, but to think positive and say to ourselves and be reminded of our latent capabilities that are within us. She reminds us, you are not alone in the battle. Like you, other combatants await support. Find out who they are and join forces with them, knowing, however, that your revolution is in connection with Jesus. It is not against the world, humankind, or life. So yes, we can find like-minded people, thank God, in this world, whether through our spiritual organizations, our spiritist centers, our synagogues, our churches, or what have you, or finding support groups or friends in our community. But ultimately, although it's great to have that support, and it's often very important to identify those support mechanisms in our lives, still, we are the one responsible to take ownership of our own lives, of our own happiness. We have to do that work. We're not alone. There are others struggling. And it's a fallacy that we often have this belief that I'm alone in my struggles. I'm the only one who's going through it. And that is truly, truly a fallacy, an incorrect way to look at life. It's not the truth. The truth is everyone struggles. Everyone has their hardships. And we're not alone on this path. There are many others that are struggling in the world, that are trying to get better, that are making attempts. So, it's a great reminder that Joanna brings to us. If we really want to be cured of our ills, allow ourselves to be scrutinized by this sublime psychotherapist, follow his instructions, break from self-indulgence, from self-pity, from self-punishment and your dark past. Allow yourself to be reborn. And if you want victory, we have to get out on the field and work for it. We're not alone in our battle. There are others struggling. It's great to have support. It's great and it's important to have resources, to know what those resources are in your community, in your family, in your social circles. It's imperative that we identify those things in our healing process. But it's equally, if not more important, to establish in our personal lives resources and things to support ourselves, whether that's daily meditation, prayer, reading positive books, feeding our soul positive things, journaling, watching talks online, finding time to listen to audiobooks, things that really feed our soul, that's going to allow those latent abilities to be awakened within us. And of course, changing our mindset and being aware of it. So, dear friends, we thank you so much for listening as we share this message from Joanna and from Jesus. Jesus and revolutionizing our lives with his message, or as the chapter is entitled, Jesus and Revolution. We thank you and hope that each one of you were able to take away from today's presentation something pertinent to our own individual lives, to your own individual life, to be encouraged, to not believe the negativity that has been fed into your heart and soul, but to be reminded that you are a child of God. You are not that illness. You are not this circumstance. You are not that trauma that happened to you. You are a child of God, destined for happiness, love, and greatness. So, dear friends, let us take this opportunity to, as we always do, end with a prayer. And we also ask that if you're not driving, wherever you are, that you take this moment to connect with our higher power, with our spirit mentors, our guides, to allow yourself to imagine yourself at this beautiful scenery at the beach or somewhere in nature. Close your eyes and envision yourself in a place that brings you immense peace in nature, connecting with this divine wisdom all around you, allowing the rays from the sun that harbors all of the high spirits, allow that energy to penetrate each cell in your body. Allow these healing vibrations to touch each cell of your body, your spiritual body, and physical bodies. Allow yourself to be connected with this greater power, our beloved Jesus and his image. Let us remember that we are safe with him, that in his arms he holds us and encourages us to begin again, to walk your journey with courage, with faith, and with a great desire to revolutionize your heart and soul, to turn ourselves inside out, to allow ourselves and every part of us to be touched by Christ, His love, His magnetism, so that we may be changed and move forward. We thank our mentors, our guides, our dear Joanna de Angelis and Divaldo Franco for bringing this book forth, helping the souls and hearts and minds of all those who are in need and those who are ready to hear, listen, and do the work. We ask for all of the nations in this world that are suffering, that although this new illness has brought great hardship, we ask that all those who are experiencing it or who know of it can take the opportunity to grow morally, spiritually, and in all positive ways, and to be reminded of our true purpose in this life, in this world. We thank you, Master Jesus, for your continued love and support. We thank you, and so be it. So, dear friends, we thank you so much for watching and participating this evening. Should you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to go to our website, ssbaltimore.org, to stay up to date with all the comings and goings of the Spiritist Society of Baltimore and what is going on, to be able to stay connected to our meetings and these beautiful teachings as well. We wish you all the blessings in the world. God bless you. Many blessings.